Hello, today is June 24th, 2019. We are here in Fondren Library. I'm Tiffany Sloan.
I'm Chelsea Wen.
And we are interviewing Francine D.
Hello.
And so, can you please tell us about where and when you were born?
I was born in Houston in 1981 at Herman Hospital before it became Memorial Herman.
And so, can you kind of describe the neighborhood and community where you grew up?
In my early childhood, we lived in apartments near the Galleria. My dad worked he was a cook in a Chinese restaurant in the Galleria, which his aunt owned. And it was really famous at the time. It's called Shanghai East. And like a lot of movie stars and stuff would go there. This was like really early Houston days when Asian community was just up and coming. And so we lived in the apartments. And then at some point, we bought a house in Oak Forest. So I went to Oak Forest Elementary. And then we moved again back to apartments in the Galleria area, and I went to Lanier Middle School. And then after Lanier, I got into HSPVA for the piano program. And so I went there for high school.
And so, when did your parents first come to the United States?
They came in 1980, so right before I was born. It was basically, they had been stuck in China during the Cultural Revolution. So as soon as, like my mom calls it, the doors were opened, they were allowed to emigrate out. They tried to get out as soon as possible. And like I said, my dad's aunt was here, and his mom, her sister, helped. I think she applied for, political asylum status. And so the three of them came here, had their green cards. They got naturalized, and I believe it was much later because they took the test in Chinese. So you have to be here like a number of years before you can do that. So I think it was like 2008 or 9 that they got naturalized. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did the rest of your family come over after you, or?
Yeah, my dad's family all came. His brothers came later, and his sister married a man from Hong Kong. So they're in San Francisco now, and so it's okay. They're in California and New York now. Yeah, we're the only ones in Houston right now.
And so, the first city your parents came to was Houston,
Was
correct?
Houston, yes.
And then, did they come for a specific reason, or?
Well, I think because there was a job here for my dad, so they felt that was, useful, and being close to family. My grandmother got a job at Dillard's, which at the time was called Josky's, and she sold like bedding. And there's this funny story she told me because she's half, so she looks kind of white. And these two like Shanghai ladies came to the store and were complaining in Shanghainese about the prices. Oh, this is so expensive. And she was like, well, if it's so expensive, don't buy it in Shanghainese. And they were like, oh God. It was really funny.
And so you said that your grandmother wasn't full Chinese, correct?
Right.
How do you think that this impacted your own self-identity?
Definitely had a great English foundation because she spoke English to me at home, and my parents spoke Shanghainese. So I got both, since I was born. So I didn't have to work as hard, I think, as some other immigrant kids in learning English. Like I already knew it before I went to school because she would read to me, and, I learned simple words, alphabet. That was definitely helpful.
And so whenever your family came to the United States, did they face any sort of difficulties?
Yes. I think it was an IHOP or a House of Pies. My mom said we went, and the waitress just refused to acknowledge us. And another waitress came over eventually and was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, that's not right. But she served us instead. But it was early, and there were not as many Asians in Houston as there are today. So I think a lot of people were still just unfamiliar with seeing us, and they didn't really know what we were doing here, and they didn't know how it was impacting the economy and jobs and things like that. I think they were just scared.
Were there any specific expectations or beliefs that your parents tried to instill in you growing up?
Education was always a high priority, so, straight A's and B's like enough. And actually, I don't know, I am a perfectionist in my own way. So I always did really well in school, but I was very shy because I didn't know how to socialize with people. I didn't really recognize that I was Asian in the beginning. I was the only Asian in my elementary school class. until 5th grade. There was a Vietnamese girl who joined us, and so I was like, oh. And in the early years, like kindergarten through 3rd grade, people just don't even realize it. They don't even talk about it. They don't know that it exists. And eventually people are like, ooh, are you Chinese? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And then later you start learning about world geography and they forget what I said. And they'd be like, ooh, are you Korean? And I'm like, no. Are you Japanese? Because they're learning all the other ethnicities. And I was like, no, you were right the first time. So, yeah, I guess do well in school. Support your family. I was always expected, when I got older and was working to provide financial assistance to my parents if they needed it. It was kind of an unspoken filial piety thing. And my brother is actually learning disabled. So for a long time, I supported all 3 of them when I was out of grad school. And it's much better now. I'm married and having a dual income helps. But when you're by yourself, it's really stressful. I got very stressed after grad school, and I sought counseling just to help me manage it. When I was in grad school, which was in Florida, I went to counseling there. And it was this dude, and he had no idea. He was just like, well, you're 18, you're legally an adult, you don't have to help with anything. And I was like, this is not the conversation I need to have. So actually at the time I moved back to Houston, there was an organization called the Asian American Family Services Center, and they provided Asian counselors of every background. There were Urdu speakers, Tamil, Gujarat, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and they were there to provide that social support of, problems specific to Asian Americans that I think other people of other backgrounds may not understand and may not be able to help as much with. So that was really useful for me, and it helped me out a lot.
And so you indicated that your first job was working in a Chinese restaurant in Houston?
Yeah.
And probably owned by your aunt?
It was a different restaurant. By that time, she had actually sold her restaurant. But it was a buffet, and it was near a Target, and it was where my dad had worked after Shanghai East, his next job. And so it was really interesting because all the waiters and waitresses there were expected to put their tips in a jar. And at the end of the day, very communist, we split them evenly. And I was just like, interesting. And I was only 16 at the time, but it seemed, an interesting, fair way to help everybody out. But yeah, most of the other workers were immigrants. And it was a mixed clientele because they were coming for a buffet, so it was a good deal, lots of food. I remember that almost all the staff in the back, other than my dad, were Hispanic. And so I actually got to practice my Spanish skills, which was my second language in school. And I realized very quickly that the Spanish spoken by the people here is very different from the Spanish that they teach you in the school books. There are words they didn't know. I was like, we need masa habichuelas, which I learned was green beans. And one of the cooks had to come out and be like, what? It was a totally different word. And so I was learning about Hispanic culture at the same time, and that there are different types of, Latinos and different countries that they came from. And it was fascinating to me because they all spoke Spanish, just slightly altered, but they were very, culturally different. And it made me think of Asians because our languages are not the same. I find it's really difficult to unify and be a powerful group, like a united group. I think the language barrier is one of the things that we have to deal with a lot as Asian Americans. Sorry, am I rambling?
No. And so you said you were growing up learning 3 different languages. Can you kind of talk about that experience and how that impacted you?
At Oak Forest, I tested into the Vanguard program, and one of the parents, her name was Ms. Villarreal, she would come in as a volunteer and teach us 30 minutes of Spanish a day. So I learned all my colors, my numbers, and when we went to middle school and you had to pick a language, Lanier actually had a foreign language program where they gave us 9 weeks each of Latin, Spanish, French, and German. And I quickly realized I really didn't like German because you have to have a spit in your mouth to speak it properly. So I just kept with Spanish, and I felt it would be useful in Texas because it's a very big population here. And it's a cool language. I don't speak it fluently, but I'm actually married to a Mexican American, and so I'm able to communicate with his parents and his family much more easily with even a little bit of Spanish. It definitely helps.
Absolutely. And so, have you always enjoyed playing the piano, just to like spiral into a different conversation?
Yeah.
And
So,
when did you decide to start?
my grandmother played, and she tried to teach me when I was 3, and I would have none of it. So I didn't actually really start to play, and this is interesting, until I was about 11 years old. And what had happened was, my parents had tried to purchase their own restaurant, and it failed. And my mom was in a pretty bad depression, so she kind of took me and my brother and just left and went home to China. So her siblings and her family are all still in Shanghai. So we lived there for about 6 months, and my cousin was playing the piano there. And for some reason, when I saw my cousin playing, it just like inspired something deep inside me. And I had some basic like how to read music and stuff in school. So I kind of picked out the songs she was doing. And my aunt noticed, and she's like, oh, you should go back and find her a piano teacher. And so eventually, when we came back to Houston, we found a teacher. And she helped me prepare an audition for HSPBA. I got in, and it was really cool. It was really cool. I love piano because it's very expressive. And at the same time, I don't like it because it's kind of a stigma on Asians. Like, you should learn piano or violin. That's it. And I also really love to sing, but I didn't actually do that publicly for a long time because in the back of your mind, you're like, you never see any Asian singers. Mm-hmm. I kind of wrote an essay about that. Like, when you grow up seeing MTV, VH1, there's nobody Asian. So you're like, okay, well, I guess piano's okay. So I did that. It was really fun, and I ended up getting my master's degree in piano. So I still play. I'm married to a violinist, so we actually work on some music together for violin and piano. So that's nice.
And so can you talk a little bit more about your focus on piano? Because you said you were kind of interested in singing,
Yes.
and kind of when that took precedence over the other.
Gosh, well, I wouldn't say either one takes precedence over the other. I love both. I don't know if you know much about PBA, but we have, classical instrument majors, jazz instrument majors, vocalists, theater, visual art. Now we have mariachi. We didn't have it back then. But a friend of mine was playing Amazing Grace in like the choir room, and we were all by ourselves. I don't remember why. So I started singing, and he's this big black guy, and he's just like, you sound black. I was like, well, I listen to a lot of Mariah Carey. But he encouraged me. He's like, you should sing more. And I didn't get into school for singing, so I didn't feel like it was the correct thing to do. But yeah, when I got to Rice, I joined the jazz band. I learned to sing jazz standards. We did a big dance for the swing club every year. And after that, when I went to grad school, I joined the Brazilian music group, and so I learned to sing some songs in Portuguese. And later, I did a lot of covers just for fun, like at open mics around town. Through OCA, they have programs called like Starry Night and the Film Festival where local artists have a chance to perform. So I did some of those, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And I sing in English and sometimes in Mandarin. We do a lot of karaoke. It's a lot of fun, and it's hard to separate the two. Like, you play and sing at the same time. You accompany yourself. And I've done arrangements where I mix like Western and Asian songs together. So that's been really cool. It's just a lot to explore. There's so much music in the world, like too much to go through. And it's just fun to play around with it.
And so this is another question that kind of goes off into a different topic.
Sure.
So you indicated that you were Miss Chinatown of Houston in 1998.
Yep.
So can you kind of talk about that experience and how that came to be?
Yeah. Like I said, I was really shy growing up. I had a lot of, and I think a lot of my Asian girlfriends feel this pressure from their moms to be perfect. And it caused me to take very few risks in my life because I figured if I wasn't sure that I could be successful, I'd rather not try it. And so I was really scared and shy growing up, which is interesting because my mom's a complete opposite. Like, she'll go out and beat you up. Like, she has all this confidence. But I think that dichotomy at home, and she didn't mean to do it, but it made me the type of person I was. But she found out from my piano teacher, like, oh, there's this pageant where you can win money for college. And I was like, okay, a pageant, like, what the heck? I'd never seen Asian pageantry girls. Like, when you watch Miss USA, Miss America, there are no Asians. So this one was like for only Asians, and I'm like, that's fascinating. And so I applied. I was a little scared, but there was a lady that I called on the phone. Her name was Linda Wu. And when she picked up the phone, she was like, hi, is this Francine? And I was like, yes. Hi, I'm Linda Wu. Just like, I had this crazy like brain turmoil because she was Asian, but she sounded completely Texan. And I learned from, joining the pageant and meeting the groups in charge of it, the CACA, that Chinese Americans had been in Houston since like early 1900s, late 1800s. And I was like, I had no idea because I was only familiar with the immigrant families that my parents were friends with, who were dealing with similar situations that we were dealing with. And I had never met this other Asian American population, so it was really eye-opening. And I was excited because I met Linda's mom, Jane G., and she had gone to Rice. And I was so excited because I wanted to go to Rice. And I'm like, it's possible. And so the pageant was really fun. I got to meet other girls from the community, and I'm still in touch with a couple of them. And one of them is in LA now doing like modeling and theater. And so it was cool. They taught us how to walk in high heels. There were a lot of practices. And you have to have a talent. So naturally I did piano. And it was really interesting. And the night of, I just remember being really stressed out. There was like too much hairspray in my hair and it felt helmety and I was like freaking out. But I went out there and, they rehearse this over and over with you. It's a really supportive, encouraging pageant. They practice for like 2 months before the night of, so there are no surprises. And I ended up doing really well, so it was cool. And then I got to go to San Francisco for the national pageant. And then I found out there was a pageant in Chicago. There was one in Hawaii. There was one in somewhere I didn't even expect, somewhere in Kansas. And I was like, wow, there are Asian American communities everywhere. And so it was really eye-opening to see that because this was before internet. This was before you would know what was happening outside of your local neighborhood. So it was really cool. It was really fun. And it brought me closer to my Asian roots, I would say, to really appreciate the culture. And in California, there are a lot of buildings called family associations. So early immigrants from, the railroad days, they built these family associations to have a place to go get help, to socialize, to kind of remember their hometown with like cultural reminders like Chinese opera or, orchestra shows. And so it was really cool to see all that.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you think connecting with your identity back then ended up shaping what you did later on in the future, career-wise?
Well, I think it made me realize that being Asian American is bigger than just one person, than just one family. And it wasn't until I got to Rice that I really saw the scope of what it means to be Asian American, because in your mind you always think the Eastern Asian countries, right? Japan, Korea, China, Vietnam. But then I met, more Indian Americans and more Pakistani Americans, and I was like, wow, we're all kind of Asian. And so it's this super colorful, varied, there's so many religions, so many languages, so many regions represented that it's important, I think, for us to find unity because we are, I feel, an undervoiced group in America. And so recognizing that and finding ways to bridge it, I think, is really important. And I think that's kind of driven some of my volunteer work. So OCA Houston is a really big organization I help out with a lot. The Asian American Film Festival of Houston is huge. We had 68 films this year. And I think exposing the younger generation to that is important because we need to see ourselves on screen. We need to hear ourselves on the radio to feel like we belong and that we're part of the tapestry of this American story.
Do you think that Asian Americans as a community kind of lack the unity that other minority groups have?
I think it does, and it may just be the historical context in which it was formed.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to brush up on my history, but so slavery and African Americans was a huge exodus, I think, that happened over maybe 200 or 300 years. So there's a shared experience there. And unfortunately, once they've been in this country for a few generations, they lose that connection to Africa. They lose the language, they lose a lot of the religion and all of the cultural elements that made them who they were before, so that they create a new unified entity here. And as far as Hispanic Americans, I actually met a lot of Cubans, El Salvadorians, when I went to Florida, right? So in Houston, there's a lot of Mexican Americans, but in Florida, they're from everywhere else. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. But again, as I mentioned, the language is a big connector. They still all speak Spanish in some shape, way, or form. So there's a communication that brings them together when they're here. I feel like Asian Americans like both that identical story, that single story that brought them here, as well as a collective language that they can, communicate better amongst themselves. So I do think that we have greater barriers to unify, in my opinion. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right answers now. I'm just
no, it's fine. Just digesting.
Yeah.
Do you think there are any ways that the community could work on increasing the unity and support?
Yeah. Well, I feel like the film festival brings a lot of people together because we show films from everywhere, right? And films from Asian American producers and writers and actors. And so you're like, oh, I know this story, I've lived it. And also some of the films are documentaries about situations that have happened. I saw Sea Drift this past summer, which was about basically after the Vietnamese War, refugees were kind of allocated into different areas of America. And a town called Sea Drift, Texas saw an influx of Vietnamese fishermen. And it caused a lot of conflict among the locals because they kind of had all these unspoken rules about, oh, you're not supposed to set more than this many traps, you're not supposed to fish outside of these hours. I mean, it didn't seem like they were laws, but they were understood by the community. But the Vietnamese fishermen came in and no one explained this to them, and they didn't speak English, and they kind of just did what they were used to in their home country, which was fish all night and fish all day. And it caused a lot of conflict that I felt could have been resolved better with more communication. And so I think seeing those stories helps us, especially you guys, a new generation, kind of expect what needs to happen in order to mitigate things that could go wrong, if that makes any sense.
And so how do you think that your Asian American identity has led you to be successful as an artist, or maybe it's hindered you?
I think it makes it definitely more interesting. So even in Houston, when we were young, we would talk about the subgroups of just Chinese Americans. The subgroups of Chinese Americans include the FOBs, right? They just came over. Language is hard. Food is hard. They kind of keep to themselves in their little bubble. And then you have what we call the bananas, right? Like they have all white friends and like they don't date Asians and they just want to like separate themselves as far as possible from their roots. And then you had what we called the Asians, who were kind of ghetto, and like they weren't fobs, but they didn't really want to assimilate in a manner that was, I don't know, I felt it was really natural, but they kind of went out of their way to just stay in their own little cliques. And so, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I was asking about how your identity affected your growth as an artist in America.
Yeah, so like for some reason I was able to see all that, but I wanted to bridge it. I felt like there was no real purpose to that separation. Like I don't want people who are just here to feel unwelcome and distanced from American culture, and I didn't want people to feel like they had to shy away from their past. So I actually perform a lot in Houston Chinese groups, and what I mean by that is there's a Chinese orchestra, and it's comprised mostly of immigrants who they kind of miss their homeland, but they're able to play erhu or guzheng or whatever. And so they form this community orchestra, and they do concerts, and and then people who are not Chinese come to the concerts and are like, oh, this instrument's so beautiful, what is it? How do you play it? And then they find students, and then they teach them, and it's like this amazing like exchange of cultures, right? And I feel like music has helped bring me that. I sing in English and Mandarin, and I think that it's cool to see how the two play off of each other. And the pop music, I mean, you get the same imagery everywhere you go, right? There's love, and there's heartbreak, and there's, I'm so tired, and like, it's all kind of the same human story. So I think art really helps bring different groups together in that sense.
And so how do you think the focus of your art has changed throughout your career?
Let's see. I'm kind of random. I'll do whatever feels fun at the time. Like for a long time I did covers, right? A friend of mine and I would find the top 40 that was most interesting, and we'd just do a cover. Or I had a band for a while, the Eastern Echo, and we'd take a song like Coldplay and we'd work it out on the Chinese instruments, and it sounded really cool in a different way. And I like, and Dr. Chen's work does that a lot too, is taking what we imagine was only for one space. Like Chinese instruments are for Chinese orchestras, but it's not. You can use them to play any kind of music, and piano is only for Western classical music, but it's not. I can play Chinese songs on the piano just as easily as I can play Bach or Beethoven. So I think that's how I kind of like to mix the cultures together. And then my favorite radio show is Generation Radio on KPFT, and what they do is they take like classic Bollywood and Indian music and they add it to dubstep, and they make it electronic and dancey, and it's so cool. And I was like, wow. So I've been following this radio show for about 10 years, and it's a great show, and I love, again, how they're fusing those cultures together to make something new that's exciting for both worlds.
And throughout your career, you've been in multiple different musical groups, and I know you've been in like the Rice Jazz Band for maybe like 10 years.
Yeah.
Can you talk kind of about some of the groups that were very impactful on you?
Sure. The Rice Jazz Band was great. Larry Slezak recently passed away. He was the director of the band, but he was the coolest guy. So I have to discuss the dichotomy between being a Shepherd School student and then Rice Jazz Band, because I don't think the Shepherd School really wants to acknowledge that jazz is high art music, and that's a debate that's ongoing. But Larry didn't teach or work in the Shepherd School. He was kind of in the basement of like some building, but he's a phenomenal player and a phenomenal teacher. And what I loved about jazz band was like you had people from all majors and all like years coming together to play, a music that they loved. And I miss that in the classical world. The classical world can be very exclusive. It can be very strict on how they define what is true high art music. And so that was a conflict that I was trying to fix in myself, because I love pop music too. I love jazz. And well, I'll never forget, it was in high school, someone asked me, who's your favorite composer? And at the time, like I said, I'm really random. I was like, oh, I love Yanni. My mom and I are listening to a lot of Yanni. And this guy gave me a face that was just so disgusted. And I felt like, did I say something wrong? But it's something I feel like is a little outdated. I feel like music should be boundaryless, borderless. And so that's why the jazz band had such an influence on me, because I saw, you know, you can play bass saxophone and it's super cool, and you can sing jazz and it's super cool, and you can play flute this way instead of that way, and it's totally okay. And I think people don't realize the skill that it takes to play jazz, and Larry really emphasized that. It's not easy to improvise on the fly on, you know, a very basic foundation. Within this foundation, you can do all this stuff. Well, first of all, technically, can you do it? And second of all, you have to kind of like immediately play it as you hear it in your mind. I mean, it's very difficult, and I don't think people give jazz musicians enough credit for that. So I really, yeah, that was one of the formative groups, I think, at least when I was younger. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Can you talk about some of the other instructors that you've had that have been very impactful for you as well?
Yeah, so my first piano teacher, her name is Chang-Lu Wu, and if you haven't interviewed her, I would recommend that you interview her. She won the George Foreman International Music Competition playing peepaw many years ago, and that's her primary instrument, but she also, this woman, got a master's in piano from U of H after she moved to Houston with, you know, very basic English skills. She and her husband were very poor. They had a little, you know, tiny apartment where she taught piano lessons in, but she's blown up. She has a huge studio now. She teaches a full range of all Chinese orchestra instruments and piano, and she does a big concert every year called the National American Youth Chinese Orchestra, and her daughter kind of spearheads that now, but like they raise funds for a different organization every year. So I think last year it was like Girl Power, something that supports young girls, and they do that for a nonprofit every year. And at the same time, they're sharing music with the whole community. So she was an amazing teacher. I loved her so much. And I studied with John Weems, who is very well known for teaching high school level pianists. And basically, once I got into PBA, Miss Wu stepped back and was like, I've done all I can for you to this point. I'm going to give you to John now. I mean, that's an amazing thing for a teacher to tell you and to do for you. And so I'll never, you know, I'm very grateful for that. And of course, Dr. Ru at Rice, he was a very strict teacher, but because I started piano so late, I had started at 11, he knew what I needed to do to kind of catch up to my peers who were in that program. So he worked me a little harder. I might have kept the fact that I was double majoring in English from him, but yeah, he was a great influence on me as well. And he still is here today, and I actually recently went to see a concert that he and his wife Hetty played together at the Kauai store, so that was nice to see him play again after all these years. Yeah.
And so you mentioned you were also double majoring in English.
Yes.
Can you talk about your motivation for that?
I've always loved to read since I was a little girl. I think my grandmother had a big impact on me as far as that. I would go to the library, check out like a stack of books every week, and then go back and return them and get another stack. So I knew I loved literature and I wanted to do something with it. And I knew I loved piano and I wanted to do something with it. But my parents were like, you're going to starve. And so the initial plan was to, you know, because my piano was very strong, if I got into Rice, to change my major to something more lucrative. Well, that didn't happen because I tried, what did I try? I tried taking some math class and I couldn't even pass the first 2 weeks. I dropped it right away. And I was like, okay, I can do both. Let me see how I do with both. So what I did was I strategically planned out summer school. I would take things like poli-sci, sociology, things that, you know, the other groups that didn't apply to my major at HCC. So I would save a little money, save a little time when I was here during the actual fall and spring semesters, and I was able to get all the credits I needed that way. And yet focus all the core classes for my majors at Rice. And it was hard. I didn't have a huge social life while I was here. That's one thing I look back and wish I'd done more of, is just to go out more with my friends and to experience more of what Rice had to offer. But I did it, and actually my corporate job now is as a technical writer. So I write manuals for oil and gas drilling tools. And I think part of that was because I chose to double major. I knew I would always have more than one option, and that's why I did it. Yeah.
So have you ever considered being a piano teacher full-time?
No, I teach about a dozen students now. I used to have more, but it's a tricky job. There has to be a connection between the pianist, the student, and the teacher. And there has to be, like, a student can come to me and never practice, and it's very unfulfilling. Or you can tell that the parents just are pushing their kids and they're not enjoying it. And it's hard to negotiate that space sometimes. So, and then you don't get medical benefits, you don't get insurance. So I think I like the balance that I have right now, which is I work full-time for a company that fiscally can take care of me better, but I keep the students who I really love to teach and who really enjoy learning from me. And so I found that, and my husband does something very similar, we found that that's the balance that's best, because if you try to do music full-time, financially, it's very difficult. It's low paying, and it's a crazy hustle. Like, most people I know teach all day, they perform at night, the weekends are full. There's no time for living your life, and I feel that's very important. I value my personal time a lot. So I probably wouldn't teach full time unless I was guaranteed that it would be financially secure.
So do you have any more questions?
Yeah. Did you, so when you enrolled in HSPVA, did you already know that you wanted to do music professionally?
So only 50% of the graduates actually go into the field that they major in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an interesting statistic. But PVA is a good school, not just because of the focus they put on your art area, but they were actually academically very high ranking. The average SAT scores was like 1350, 1400, so it was very high for a high school of the region at the time. So I went there wanting something different. Oak Forest was a nice experience for me. It was a small school, and the Vanguard program is even smaller. So you're with peers who are just as creative, just as curious, just as hardworking as you are. When I went to Lanier, it was very eye-opening because I had, classmates who were pregnant, and there were gangs, and there were colors that you weren't supposed to wear, but no one, if you didn't know, you didn't know, no one told you. And it was just chaotic. And I realized that if I went to Lamar or one of the bigger schools that a lot of Lanier kids go to, I probably wouldn't be happy, and I probably wouldn't do my best. So I did a lot of research on high schools in the area, and because PVA is a Vanguard school, I was able to apply. So I didn't go in knowing that I wanted to do piano as a career, but I knew that I wanted to hone my skill and at the same time academically get a very strong foundation for college. And that's mainly why I chose it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were at Rice, was there a strong community of Asian Americans?
There was. I joined the CSA, Chinese Student Association, and actually my roommate and I were co-college leaders for a while. We were the Weiss College representatives. And it was fun, but at some point I met more politically minded people. And I realized that there were things that CSA could do more of that would really benefit the community. The focus seemed to be mostly on socializing, which was good because you want to socialize with your Chinese peers and relate. Oh yeah, my family does this too. Oh, I totally feel you. Oh, you gotta be. It's gonna be okay. We'll all survive, right? But at the same time, we didn't talk much about, why is there a bamboo ceiling? Why is it that we're all performing so well in school, but we don't see ourselves in president, CEO, leadership positions in the community. And there wasn't a lot of conversation about that. So it was actually through other groups like APAHA and, you know, groups that were more politically minded that helped me kind of increase my scope of what does it mean to be an Asian American and what can you do to help your community. So yes and no, I was involved in a lot of groups here, but I feel like sometimes the ethnic groups can be a little bit more, I'm trying to think of the word, more social than purposeful, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it still the case? Like, are you in CSA? I'm just guessing that you're Chinese.
I'm not active in CSA.
Okay.
I think there's been a little bit of improvement.
Good.
But yeah, it's kind of the same.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. You know, it's every group has a purpose and their own mission. Maybe they don't, you know, want to be burdened by that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that when I went to Florida, and this was the University of Florida in Gainesville, it was, how do I explain this? So it was about 2003, and at the time, the Asian student population was only about 7% of a very big school. And it was a very, again, mixed Asian population, a lot of Filipinos, Vietnamese, not so many Chinese, but they were fighting to get an Asian American student union. So basically UF had a black students union and Hispanic student union, but there was none for the Asian Americans. And yeah, we're only 7%, but come on, like representation, come on. And so like we were doing a lot of events and trying to like increase awareness, and we held a lot of committee meetings and hearings with the board. And it was a few years later, but they actually got it passed. So there's now an Asian American Student Union at UF. Mm-hmm. And it's basically an umbrella organization for multiple Asian groups. So the Filipino group, the Chinese group, the Korean group, they're all like under this one big umbrella organization, and they help each other and so they support each other. And I think that's something that was missing at Rice. I feel like a lot of the groups were very siloed, like CSA is doing this thing with boba, oh, but RT is doing that thing with boba, but they're not related, and they're not like, you know, so I feel like it could be done better.
I don't know if this happened when you were at Rice, but we have a Lunar New Year festival that's kind of
Yes.
a combination of all of them.
Yes.
So it's kind of like they work together for that. I
It's
think.
really fun.
Yeah.
I actually have a program where I sing.
Oh
one.
yeah.
But yeah, and it's a great opportunity for everyone to get together.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish we did more of that throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Going back to your music, could you describe kind of the creative process that you go through when you're thinking of projects and things
Ooh.
like that?
Okay. Well, as I learned more about Chinese music, I realized that I couldn't play it on the piano. It was weird. It was like I didn't know how to play piano, but it's a very different music theory, and so you kind of have to get used to it. And the more I played, the better I got. But in the very beginning, I was just like, I feel like a toddler again. It was really weird. But so I'll take a piece and I'll listen to it and I'll sing it. I'll really try to ingest it, and then usually I try to put my own spin on it a little bit. So yeah, and a lot of it's just me at the piano messing around. Again, influence from jazz. Just what does this sound like? What does that sound like, right? And it took a long time for me to shift to that from I have to write down every single note so that I don't forget what I was doing. So it's really cool to experience both worlds. It's kind of like speaking two languages, and like folk music is like a third language, a third layer on that, right? But it's super fun. And I feel like every classical musician would benefit from kind of stepping outside the box and learning a little bit about what else there is. Story in point, Caroline Shaw was my suite mate, and she was a violin major at the Shepherd School, so very talented. But I will never forget, she joined the a cappella group. What's the a cappella group on campus? What are they called?
The fills.
Yeah, she joined the Fills. She auditioned and joined the Fills, and I'm like, weird. But she loved it, and I think some of those experiences are what helped her. Like, she just won a Pulitzer for a composition a couple years ago. Like she's a very successful composer and musician now. And I think those experiences outside of the classical realm are what help contribute to that. Because people want what's current and they want something they can relate to. And as much as I love the classics, they've been dead for hundreds of years and it's really hard to relate to them today. So there's a fine balance, right? I always will enjoy a classical concert that's very pristine, that's very pure and formal. But for example, my husband's working on doing more house concerts in Houston, which are super casual. Everyone's sitting there with their wine. And like, it's a totally new and different way to enjoy live music. And I think people forget that when we go to Jones Hall and we're just like, oh, let me not breathe, you know? And it should be enjoyable. Music should be an enjoyable experience that brings people together. And I think that's what I want to create more of.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that a lot of your projects have Asian influence or personal influence in them?
Yeah, and I actually love K-pop. It's really popular now, but I mean, I first heard it in college, and I'm like, what is this music? And I watched way too much anime, so I love Japanese pop too. And it's cool to see how different they are. Like, all of the music from these regions is really different. Like, you think all Asian music is the same, but it's not. And it each has its own voice and texture and like flavor, and like hearing them all and experiencing all is really cool, and it adds to your own palette. So I think it's both personal and it's both inspiration from outside as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could you describe the process of how you founded the Fei Tian Contemporary Eastern Folk Music Ensemble?
Sure. And then we changed the name from Fei Tian to Eastern Echo.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, so my mom is part of the Houston Chinese Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Houston Chinese Orchestra way back that my first piano teacher, Miss Wu, was part of too. But they got in a fight and broke up. And that happens a lot. So my mom was in one, and she plays percussion. And they needed a pianist to like do some accompaniment, and that's kind of the beginnings of my playing Chinese music, Chinese folk music. Mm-hmm. So I joined them, and we played, and this other girl who played the erhu, and another girl who played peepal, they were like, we were all kind of young and kind of cute, and we were like, we should do a band, just like 12 Girls Band, right? We should do the Houston version. Mm-hmm. And so, but we didn't have any money, so we got together, and we wrote some grants for HAA. Mm-hmm. And we got one, a $10,000 grant to do whatever we wanted within a year. So we put on this huge concert, and this is the program from that. Mm-hmm. And we got a rapper to come. He's actually going to be a lawyer and a politician soon. His name was Rocco Steady at the time, mm-hmm. but his name is now Jim Narvios, and he's about to be a JD. But we also got some of my jazz friends to come, and so we did this big combined piece with jazz and folk. Mm-hmm. And then we had also an African woman who was in town, and she's a drummer and songwriter. She actually tours all over the world now, but she came and played with us, and it was super fun. But the orchestra got mad at me because we used the grant for that and not for them. So then the orchestra forgot. But now there's a new Chinese orchestra that my mom is back in with a different director, and I still play for them from time to time. And actually, my husband will play violin with them as well, because they do a lot of mixed ensemble pieces with Western instruments and Chinese instruments combined. Mm-hmm. So we're still pretty active in it, but that's how my mom was like, I need a pianist. I'm like, okay.
So how were you able to, or how did you find the other members, I guess?
So they were all playing in the orchestra at the time, and it's a completely volunteer orchestra. Mm-hmm. And it was basically word of mouth, like, we don't have enough of this instrument, so people would ask around. Mm-hmm. And more and more now, there are Chinese schools in Houston being built that offer music programs. And so that was building up, and so there was a young generation of performers here who could play Chinese instruments, which was really cool to see.
So what would you say is things that you draw inspiration from for your music?
I would say So it's a very volatile time that we live in. You know, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of conflict. And I think one thing that music can do is both educate and try to bridge those gaps. So I think one of the things that influences me is how can we remind ourselves that we're all kind of in this together. Some of my major influences are Stevie Wonder, India Ari, Jill Scott, Sarah Bareilles. Like people with messages in their songs that go a little deeper, that kind of, you know, ask questions of who are we? Who am I to judge you? What, you know, what can we do to be a more, I guess, solidified human race? And just recognize that we're all kind of here together, and we should help each other. We shouldn't bring each other down. Yeah.
What do you think has been the most difficult part about being an independent artist?
Gosh, I don't even know if I would call myself an independent artist. As I said, I do work full-time, but this is, you know, my passion that I do. The most difficult part, I guess it's like there's all these things that you want to do, right? I want to write a book someday. I've been working on it for years. I want to create a songbook. One of the projects I wanted to do was I want to make a piano pedagogy book with Asian folk music, because I've seen some on the market and I don't like it, and I think I could do it better. And then there's more songs that I would like to do with my husband, and there's things I want to write and sing on my own. I think the greatest challenge is there's so many projects that you want to do, but you only have, you know, this 24 hours a day, and it's all allocated, and just finding the time to really sit down and be disciplined and do it, I think, is the hardest part.
Have there ever been periods of self-doubt, and how did you deal with that?
All the time. I think some of it came with just age. When I was young, I was always very scared of singing. I was very scared of performing. As you get older, you realize that it's not about the perfection, it's about the connection with your audience and the message that you're bringing them. And I don't know if that's something that young people can necessarily grasp right away. Like, you see the virtuosos, the world-renowned performers, and I think they're special. I think that they are very aware and confident from a young age about what their mission is and what they're doing in this world. I think most of us who just learn to play piano and learn to sing have a very different approach to life. But yeah, if you love it enough, you keep doing it no matter what. Even if you're doubting, even if you're scared, you just keep doing it. And over time, it becomes easier, and over time, you open up. And over time, you're just like, I don't give a crap. I like this, so I'm going to do this. And then, yeah, if that was a weird answer, but I hope it made sense.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about how music can be a unifying force.
Yeah.
So how do you think music is important to you personally in your life?
I can't imagine a day without it. Like, when I wake up, I'm always hearing something. It could be something I heard on the radio yesterday, or it could be, oh, the voicing here, I need a different fingering. Like, it's always something going on. And when I work, I'm listening to music all the time, right? Oddly, the only time I don't listen to music is when I work out. That's when most people listen to music, but I like to focus on what I'm doing. Yeah, I can't imagine life without it. I sing in the shower, I sing in the car, and it's just one of the greatest joys of my marriage is being able to share the love of music with my husband. And so I can't imagine life without music. It's just, yeah, I think it's an amazing force, and it's universal because no matter where you go, and this is like the doctoral thesis I wanted to write someday, a dissertation, if I ever get a chance to go back to school. I have this theory that landscapes and native music are very intertwined, because part of it is learning about Chinese music. China's huge, right? So there's mountainous regions, there's coastal regions, there's plains. And it's really interesting to hear the similarities between mountainous Chinese music and like Peruvian pan flutes. And it's like, oh, if you listen to like this type of music, it's a lot like the island music here in Moravia. And you're just like, wow. So is nature influencing the folk music of a region? And I find that to be a fascinating question. If I ever went back to school, that's probably something I would research. How like regions and language inspire the local music. Because I think it's innate. I think music and rhythm is innate in everyone. And it's just, it's just part of being a person.
So does your husband ever influence your music or vice versa?
Yes, he makes me practice more. Yeah. So he's a violinist, very opposite personality. They like to be in the limelight. They like to be the star. They want to be the best. They're very competitive, and it's good because it kind of brings my game up, and I'm also there to be like, calm down. We're not running a marathon. And so yeah, he influences me a lot. And I'm learning a lot more repertoire because of him, because as a pianist, there's tomes of music that we learn and play because there's just a lot of it, but we don't learn a lot about orchestral repertoire, what the string players play, what the horn players, what the flute players play. We just don't learn it. And so hearing all the stuff he plays, I'm like, oh wow, that's really beautiful. Like I never learned that in school because there's just not enough time, right, to learn everything. But he's exposed me to more string music, and in my mind I'm like, how can we put an erhu in this? Like, so it's really fun, and like all the options that we can explore. So yes, definitely.
Okay. So you stayed on the board of Asian alumni at Rice.
Yes.
Can you describe what you do with that?
Well, one day Cecil Fong came up and he was like, we need a new president. And I was like, I don't want to do it. And he's like, oh, you'll be great. And so I kind of got roped into it. And my friend Catherine Roundtree, also Rice alum, so we co-presidented for a few years. It was an amazing opportunity, and I had so many visions for what we could possibly do for the Rice Asian community. The board, we didn't really have a board. Like we started with a board and then everyone kind of left. And so we were kind of on our own. It was very struggly. We had amazing help from the Office of Student Affairs and David, oh my gosh, I can't remember his last name. Don't kill me. I see his face and I don't know why I can't remember his name. He works in the Allen Center. He's over like student affairs, cultural affairs, but he was an amazing help. We did a really cool event in 2017, mostly because of his assistance to us, because we didn't have a board, we didn't have a lot of people working with us. His office helped us make this cool event possible where we got to showcase a lot of current Asian students like artwork and spoken word and stuff like that. And Ann Chow actually showed a brief documentary about the Ha Project and what she was doing. And then there was Asian food catered from like Glen Gondo and all these sponsors, and it was really awesome. And it was basically to celebrate when the first Asian student started at Rice, which was 1911, I think. I can't even remember my dates anymore, but he was Filipino. And so it was celebrating 100 years of Asians at Rice. And it was, I don't think it was vain for us to step back and like look at all the students and the staff and the professors who happen to be of Asian descent but who have contributed to the lifeblood of this university. It's I don't think we'd ever pulled it out and focused on it before, and it was just amazing, like the breadth and the span. And what we really wanted to do was start a fund for the student groups to be able to like try new projects and have some money for that. I don't think it went as far as we had hoped it would, and Catherine and I after that, we kind of stepped down. It had been 2 or 3 years. We were really burned out, and we were hoping that some of the younger generation would step up. But it's really difficult because a lot of Asian students are super focused on school. And so they don't have a whole lot of time for leadership positions. And then once they graduate, they're super focused on med school, or they're super focused on grad school, or they're super focused on, I want to move up the rank in this company. And it's really hard to get them involved as deeply as you need to be for an organization like this. So my hope is that we'll have some people kind of stumble on that event, news about the group, and be like, huh, what's this? I wonder what I could do on that group. And so that's one of my biggest hopes, is that younger generations will kind of revitalize RECA and try to move it forward where we weren't able to.
So how do you think that your race or your gender has affected your ability to be successful as an artist in America?
Ooh, yeah. Well, so the essay that I published was about that, about how, you know, I still haven't seen an Asian American artist really break out. When I was young, I would like kind of, well, I was in all these groups, and so there were newsletters, and I was scoping them for like Asian American artists. So Vienna Tang was really popular at the time. Priscilla Ahn came out. We had Jin, the rapper. Like they were few and far between, but I noticed that they were never mainstream radio play here. And unfortunately, we still haven't found that person. And so yes, I definitely think race plays a role in kind of denying us a position at the table. I mean, Crazy Rich Asians was a really forerunning film because, I mean, since Joy Luck Club, well, Better Luck Tomorrow came out, but it wasn't really popular. Not a lot of people knew about it, but it was an all-Asian cast and a story that was not focused on Asian experience, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard to see the media show us just kind of in our natural state. There was a TV show for a while. It was called Fast Forward, I think, and Flash Forward, but it was only one season. But I'll never forget it because John Cho played this, they were like trying to figure out, like basically one day everything in the world shut down, everyone fell asleep, and they woke up like, they all woke up at the same time a little later, and everything was on fire, and buses had crashed, planes had crashed, and so they were the people assigned to figure out what had happened. And he was one of the agents, and it was just like part of the story, like, yeah, he's not a doctor, he's just this Asian agent and it was so natural, and it was really a slice of what I feel my life has been like. I mean, we're just here, we're just doing what you guys do, we're just with you, and it's so rare to see that. Like, it's always, oh, you have to be this, box character. You're the Japanese sushi chef, or you're like, the accountant. I mean, it's very, yeah. So I hope that with more time and more films like that we kind of break that cycle.
Could you talk about how you found Asian American X and the process of getting published?
So I saw a call for essays. There were two Harvard students who were trying to compile essays about the Asian American experience. And I was just like, oh, that's neat. Well, I want to complain about music. And so I kind of wrote it. I did a lot of research for it and submitted it. And then after a few weeks, I kind of forgot about it. But it was months later that they contacted me. They're like, we chose your essay. And by then I was like, you did? That was a piece of crap. But they were like, no, we really liked it. And so it was cool. And University of Michigan published the book. And I think Dr. Comer here at Rice actually uses it sometimes in her Asian American class. And that's a really cool story too. So my first Asian American course at Rice was taught by Dr. Comer. It was an Asian American film class, and we saw Eat a Bowl of Tea, and we saw like the most random things, and she kind of opened my eyes to that cinema world, because my parents are immigrants, they don't know those films. And so I was like, wow. And then as I got more involved, I found out, wow, Houston has an Asian American Film Festival, and so I started involving myself and volunteering with them. And there's so much out there, but I think part of our job is to disseminate it and to share it on our platforms. If major media is not going to do it, then we have to do it ourselves. If they don't give us a table seat, well, we just have to make our own table, you know? And so I think that's part of our job.
Have there been experience in the past where you personally felt you were treated differently because of your ethnicity, and how did you react to that?
Let me think. So in middle school, I was waiting for my mom to pick me up after a drill team practice, and for some reason she was late, so I was by myself. And this Hispanic kid came up. I was like, "You chink." And in my mind, I was like, "Well, you're Hispanic. I don't know what to call you," because I didn't learn any of the words. I was very like, and I was like, "Why are you treating me that way?" Because in a sense, we're kind of in the same struggle, right? We're both minorities, we're both fighting for a place. And so I didn't even say anything. I didn't know what to say. I didn't have anything to say. I was too, scared to say. But I remember that really vividly, because, I mean, I'm sure there were things that he was trying to deal with, and that's just what came out. But I wish that either maybe his English wasn't good and we could speak, and I wanted to talk to him, but he didn't want to speak, but I wanted to have a conversation, why did you say that? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are we fighting against each other when we could be supporting each other, right? And so, yeah, I always remembered that. And then the story my mom told me about the restaurant, I think it's inevitable. There are always going to be people who are not going to see eye to eye, who don't take the initiative to educate themselves and expose themselves to new things. And so I think we just have to manage that and recognize, as long as we feel we're doing the right thing, we're taking the correct steps in our life and in our community, that hopefully, karma will pay it back, and that things will work out the way they're supposed to. But it's definitely hard at times.
So what do you think we could do to better promote the recognition of Asian artists or minority artists in the community?
Support them. Go to their shows. Post on your Instagram and your Facebook. Help them advertise, right? Make them more visible, because if mainstream media doesn't do it, we have to do it. And so, the Happy Film Festival is awesome, because basically there wasn't an Asian American Film Festival here. So they were like, let's make one. And we're going to call for all these people to submit their films, where they might not get attention at other festivals. We're going to focus on them. We're going to give them attention. And Houston's actually a really great spot, because we also have a disabilities film festival. I don't know if you guys knew that. It's called REEL, REEL, Abilities, and it's films focused on people with disabilities and the struggles that they have. There's an LGBTQ film festival. We are really forward-looking, I think, as a community in that sense, because we're so diverse. I think we've had to adjust how we, how the art world works here. And I think it's much more accepting and vibrant than even New York sometimes. And people don't realize that. They think Houston, you ride horses to school. And I'm like, no. You have no idea, right? And so I think part of our job is to help promote and to actually support, Spend that $10 and buy their album. You guys don't use Napster, but don't just, don't just take it and then share it with people and listen to it. And they're like, oh, what's that? Well, let me tell you. I think we have to be our own promoters, and I think that's how we can increase our voice.
Going off of that, do you have any advice for the younger generation of Asian Americans?
Be confident.
Mm-hmm.
I was never very confident. I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me around me.
Mm-hmm.
But Houston especially is very different today. We could probably hold a sizable rally if we all came together.
Mm-hmm.
I think be confident and also be aware of the needs of the older generations too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there are a lot of social services for the elderly
Mm-hmm.
and language programs and things that they are still in great need of. And I think as the young people, we are kind of back to that filial responsibility, right? They can't do it anymore. So we need to kind of absorb some of that burden and help them. So one of the things that OCA does is we help register elderly voters and drive them to the polls and make sure that their votes get counted. There are a lot of programs that you can volunteer at nursing homes, that you can help translate at court hearings. You need training for things like that. But these things that people don't really think about, that the generations here that kind of pave the road for us are still in need of. So both look forward for yourselves and your future family, and also look back and support the ones that were here before you.
How do you think that the Asian American community has changed during your time here?
It's exploded.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. We never had a Chinatown like this when I was young, Asiatown, I should say. It's one of the biggest, by mileage, by sheer square mileage, it's one of the biggest in the country. Also something people don't realize about Houston. And it's super diverse. It's not just Chinatown, it's not just Viettown, it's completely mixed and Asian. So that's been a crazy change in the past, I'd say 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And also food. People are coming to eat Asian food and they're not Asian. And it's wow. Because when I was young, I remember I once took sesame balls to lunch. My mom gave me sesame balls. And this girl was so scared. She's like, "Are you eating dirt?" And then I was like, "No." And she ran and got the teacher. And the teacher, because they were concerned for me. I mean, I appreciate that they were concerned for me, but the teacher was like, "Francine, what are you eating?" And I was like, "Food," because I didn't know how to say sesame balls. But they're black inside. And so, but now today, I feel like foodies from all races know everything about what to eat in Asiatown and how to order pho and how to order, they know it because it's good. And I think food has been a really interesting way that we can kind of share our cultures. And yeah, it's changed a lot. I see so many Asians today and different kinds of Asians. I was recently at Arthur Story Park, which is a park down by the Beltway South and 59. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of in a shady neighborhood, but it's a Harris County park. It's beautiful. And we were out there one day and we saw Hispanics and we saw Sikhs and we saw Asians and we saw all types of people just out enjoying the park. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. This is Houston, I'm so proud of my city. I feel like we're all very fortunate to be in this type of environment. And I think that's part of the reason we are more accepting is because we see it every day. We're exposed to it every day. And I think some of the people who are more prejudiced and scared, they just don't have that. They just don't have the exposure. And I think if they got to know us like we can here in the city, things would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've always been proud of being Asian?
It's come and gone. When you're really young and, when you hear people say, "Oh, well, Asians are only good at math." I'm not. You kind of want to hide it, and Asians are in that model minority bucket where, well, you are kind of white, but we're not. And you're kind of pedestaled as a white person, but you don't get any of the benefits. It's this really weird gray area. So there are times where I was like, man, I wish, life probably would be easier if I weren't Asian, if I didn't look this way, if people, you know, looked at me and didn't expect me to speak English as well as I can, right? It's always like, oh, but yeah, I think, and it comes with age and meeting more people and getting more life experience and maturing, that you realize it's really great. And every person's background shapes who they are, and no one should be ashamed of that. No one should have to be ashamed of where they come from. So it's that's another piece of advice. Be confident and don't be ashamed. You are beautiful just the way you are. Yeah.
So what are your future goals for your career and your personal life?
I don't want to be in oil and gas forever. That's definitely a given. This is not going to my company. But yeah, no, I've been working on a book for a long time. And hopefully spending more discipline on that. It's a collection of short stories that, through storytelling from my parents over the years about their experiences in China and then coming here. My parents actually have a really interesting background. My mom's dad was a play director, and her mom was a film actress. I actually have seen some movies that she's been in. But during the Cultural Revolution, they were blacklisted because of those very occupations. My dad's really tragic story. He actually came to UC Berkeley to get a degree in civil engineering. He went back to China, and you know, he wanted to use that degree to help build infrastructure and improve the city. But he went back at a very volatile time, right before, you know, the Red Army was taking control. And they basically labeled him a spy, and he died in prison. And so a lot of those stories in the context are things that I don't want to be lost when my parents are gone. So it's kind of like this process, but it's mostly when they're relaxed and they don't feel like they're being interviewed that I get the details and I kind of shape it into a more, you know, palatable literary structure. My goal is to submit it to the Iowa Short Story Award, and I'll probably have to do it a few times, but hopefully it gets through. I also work on poetry. It'd be nice to publish my poetry, and also my husband and I are doing a lot of music projects, and like I said, I wanted to write the book of Chinese piano pieces or Asian folk piano pieces to kind of help people like me, you know, growing up and there wasn't any Asian music in the repertoire, so I want to kind of change that. I want them to see that it's normal and great to have your ethnicity represented in the literature. Yeah, that's the stuff off the top of my head.
What do you think has been your greatest accomplishment so far?
That's a tricky one. I feel like accomplishments in itself is a weird definition, right? So is it winning an award? Is it making this much money a year? Is it buying a house? I feel like my greatest accomplishment is that I am proud of my life, the way I live my life. It took a lot of struggle to come to terms with my role as a daughter and also wanting to be independent. But I feel like I've been able to learn how to balance that very well. And I feel like I'm a very good daughter without being, without like giving overly and too much of myself, if that makes sense. So finding my identity and being able to support my parents while pursuing my personal goals at the same time without feeling either part is lacking, I think is a really good accomplishment for me.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. I actually thought of something.
Sure.
So you said that your brother has a learning disability?
Yes.
Do you think that something like that is treated differently in the Asian community?
Yeah, I definitely think there's more of a stigma on any sort of either disability or even mental health, right? Like going to see a counselor, like why would you do that, right? But I feel like my parents managed it very well. And they've always been very supportive of my brother. They've never really shunned him. And I think part of it is because my great aunt, the restaurant owner, she actually had polio as a child. So she's visibly disabled, and I think my parents grew up seeing that and seeing how successful she became. They saw that, okay, it's not really about the cards that you're dealt, but how you use the time you have here and your abilities. So my brother actually, he works. It was kind of a language deficiency. My mom had him very late. She was like 44. So they basically told us not to teach him Chinese. And that was unfortunate because it makes communicating with my parents a little more hard for him. But they were like, since he already has the language, thing, let's focus on English because he's here and that's what the majority of his life and his interactions will be. So he is at a 5th grade math level, 6th grade math level, 5th grade English level, but he's functional and he has friends and he loves anime and he plays a lot of online games and he knows people on there, so I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. And when he was in high school, they voted him historian of the anime club, so he's, he gets along very well. But I think my parents might have a different experience from parents who are still in China, where I think it's still very difficult to admit or to deal with the fact that someone that you're close to might need help. People don't like to admit that they need help, and we all need help sometimes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I hope I've answered your questions okay.
Yeah.
And I really hope you interview Ms. Wu and also my mom if you guys ever have a chance. I don't know how the schedule works, but she's got a lot of fascinating stories about her parents and the movie industry in China. And and just the Cultural Revolution and their experience is very, it's intense. It's intense, so it's a story that I don't want to get lost. Yeah. But you guys were awesome. Thank you. I hope I was okay. I did kind of ramble.
That was good. You were great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.